Hello and welcome to Sam Not So Wise. My name is Sam. So, Kazuo Ishiguro. He is an author who has been a favourite of mine for a while now. I made it a mission of mine to read all of his books. I talked about this in a video a few months ago now, I think, in which I talk about authors that I have read all of their works or authors that I want to read all of their works. He was in that video. I'll pop a link in the description to that if you want to find out who else is on that list. But basically, the takeaway from this is that I have finished everything that Kazuo Ishiguro has written as of just a few days ago. So I thought it would be a fun idea to do a kind of reading guide to him. Nothing incredibly in depth, just I want to give some brief descriptions of each of his works. I'm kind of blocking them together into loose categories where they are kind of linked by a certain theme. So I'll do that, and I'm going to talk about whether each one may be a good place to start if you haven't read any Kazuo Ishiguro, and I'll finish the video off by doing my own personal rankings of his works. So with that and much further ado, let's talk about the fantastic author Kazuo Ishiguro. So let's start with some context as to the author. Who is Kazuo Ishiguro? He is a Japanese-born British writer. He moved from Nagasaki at the age of 6, but he moved there later again in his late 20s, I believe. And he went on to write 8 novels and 1 short story collection. We have no current announcements for further releases at the moment. He is 70 years of age at the moment, so who knows if we'll get another one. I really do hope so, but at the moment he has those 9 works. His last book written was Clara and the Sun, which was published 4 years ago in 2021. He is a highly decorated author. He was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in 2017, as well as being nominated for the Booker Prize 4 times, winning it in 1989. He has also won a whole smattering of other awards in literature as well. 4 of his books have been adapted into films, a TV series, a play, and a 5th book is being adapted next year, which is Clara and the Sun, which is going to be a film. So that is just a brief little overview of who Kazuo Ishiguro is. So now I will move on to the books. So I talked about grouping these books into sections that have kind of linking themes with them, and I'm going to start with actually the last 3 books he has written, because these are kind of sci-fi or fantasy focused or leaning to certain different extents over the 3 books. And my channel, on my channel, I focus mostly on sci-fi and fantasy, not just, but they are kind of my bread and butter. So I thought it would be a good place to start with those. And I'm going to start with the book, Never Let Me Go. So this story begins as a kind of coming of age tale of a few friends in a fancy boarding school in the UK. This slowly turns into a heartbreaking tale of a dystopia. It's a book which, in my opinion, is kind of the pinnacle of the Ishiguro style, his kind of creepy style of writing, where there's kind of a sense that something is going on in the background that kind of underpins the world, but it's only gradually revealed to us as the focus generally tends to be on the intimate and the personal lives of the characters. It's very much a story of kind of normal everyday people, but eventually in this book a sci-fi concept is revealed which turns our perspectives on their head and just leads to heartbreaking circumstances. I'm not going to tell you what the sci-fi concept is because that would be a massive spoiler. So that is all I'm going to say about this book. A film and a TV series have been made for this book as an adaptation. And I think this is a brilliant place to start for Ishiguro if you want to. It is actually where I started. This is the first book I read by him. And I really think it gives a good sense of his general style and the emotional weight that he can put into his books. The next book I'll talk about is Clara and the Sun, his most recent release. And this is kind of another dystopian book with more of an overt sci-fi concept, in my opinion, as we follow the perspective of Clara from the beginning, who is an artificial friend, essentially kind of an AI robot who provides companionship to their buyers. Clara is bought by a sickly child in Josie, and Clara's perspectives is kind of one that is highly naive, as prior to her purchase, all she has really known is the shop in which she has waited to be bought. From here, we get the story of her integration into a difficult family situation in which the themes of loneliness and belonging are explored multifacetedly and with real emotional depth, as always with Ishiguro. This is going to be adapted into a film next year, and I think it is another decent place to start, but perhaps not overly representative of Ishiguro's style due to it being kind of more overtly sci-fi in nature. But you could start here, and is another brilliant dystopian sci-fi example of Ishiguro's creepy works with that atmosphere of something going on in the background. Another brilliant book. Finally, in this kind of speculative SFF fiction section, we have The Buried Giant, which is a fantasy story set in kind of Arthurian style world. We follow an old couple in a world where memories are fleeting, and they are searching for a son that may or may not exist. They can't quite remember. The book features like Anglo-Saxons, ogres, mythological heroes, a spooky ferryman and a dragon. So very much going outside of reality here. It is magical and quite a trippy tale in many ways that twists and turns a lot in its exploration of memory versus truth, vengeance and forgiveness, and long-lasting love. There are no current adaptations for this one, but apparently there may be a stop-motion film in the works. I would not necessarily want to recommend you start with this book, as it is just a little bit too out there for a first Ishiguro work in terms of style, and again it leans a lot more into the fantastical, which is just kind of like not that common for him, not to these levels. So a good book, but maybe not the best place to start. So now we move on to the second section, which I'm calling historical leaning stories, which also just happen to be his first 3 books. So we've gone from his last 3 to his first 3. So they're kind of historical fiction-ish, related to that kind of genre. His first 2 books were focused on Japan in the aftermath of World War II. So the first one I'll talk about is his first book, which is A Pale View of Hills. In this book, we follow a widowed Japanese woman who lives in the UK and has just lost her first daughter. When her second daughter comes to visit, she begins reminiscing about an old friend and her daughter who she knew back in Nagasaki, where she grew up. Through these flashbacks, we get an idea of the dichotomy of opinions of Japan's direction following the devastation of World War II. But really, that's not the focus of this book. This book explores the grief of losing loved ones, where he parallels the 2 characters, the present woman and her friend back in the past, in a way in which memory blurs the lines of truth and ends the book with, like, in a truly devastating fashion, where you can almost see mental barriers that she had been building up for so long eventually break down. This is a beautiful and devastating read and would be a wonderful place to start for Ishiguro's style. It is also a very short book, so a nice one to just kind of get into if you're curious about Ishiguro. This has been adapted as a film this year, so yes, a great place to start, historical in nature and truly devastating. Next up, we have the second book that he wrote, which is called An Artist of the Floating World. Now, similarly to A Pale View of Hills, this is set in post-World War II Japan. This book takes that one theme of the previous book and makes it into the central theme of this book, that of Japan kind of finding its place in a new and drastically changed world. We follow the perspective of an aging artist who used to work as a propagandist for the Japanese in World War II. Now, younger people are kind of blaming people like him for the death and destruction that befell in Japan in the Second World War. It is all done in a very Japanese fashion where politeness and propriety are key, where nobody says anything outright, but they say things through contextual language and contextual clues, so nothing is really out there, which really fits Ishiguro's style of stuff going on, bubbling underneath the surface. This book explores responsibility of actions and placing blame, as well as the difficulty of rapidly changing attitudes and coming to terms with the past. Another great place to start, in my opinion, another short book. You could really get through this quickly and get a good sense of Ishiguro's style. I think Pale View of Hills might be a little bit better as a starting place, but you could start here if you find this book. It has apparently been made into a TV movie as well, so that is the second of the Japanese history books. Finally, in this historical section we have, I've actually got the physical one of this, The Remains of the Day. Now, this story follows an English butler called Stevens in the 1950s in the UK, of course. Not a lot happens in this book, really, but is rather an elderly gentleman looking back on his life whilst on a rare holiday. In this reminiscing that he does on his trip, he looks back on his service to a man who was a Nazi sympathizer, hence the historical fiction ties that I'm talking about, and begins to question his loyalty to such a person. But really, the story's strength don't lie in that part of the book. It's all about really his reflections on his own life, where he has spent it basically trying to perfect his profession to almost an obsession. It is a story that questions to what extent you should dedicate yourself to your career. Stevens reflects that he has potentially missed out on a greater level of happiness in ignoring relationships over his life for the benefit of his career. This is another tear-jerking book, a kind of quite a simple story, and is, again, I think, a wonderful place to start. It's a little bit longer, and I think it does benefit from that in kind of going deeper into the emotions, and the end will make you tear up. This was his Booker winner book and has also been adapted into a film. This is a lot of people's favourite book by Ishiguro, and I'll tell you about that later when I do my rankings. So the rest of the books were kind of less easy to categorize and put together, so I am going to call this final section simply Others. So we will start with The Unconsoled. This is a very trippy and dreamlike book in which a man travels to a city in which to perform an important piano concert. He can't really remember much of why he is there or what he has to do while he is there. He's got a big schedule, but he can't remember any of it. The locals are all extremely interested in him and are beseeching him to do them favors. And the story kind of twists a lot, kind of like at a breakneck speed. Stuff's going on here and there, and it changes in this trippy fashion. And it feels like there's almost no real direction because of this. And all sorts of disasters are happening whilst this is going on. And this book kind of explores a small town mentality and selfishness of people in such towns. Now, this is a very difficult and challenging read and would definitely not be a good place to start with Ishiguro. I beg and beg and beg you, do not read this as your first Ishiguro book. The last full novel I will talk about is When We Were Orphans. Now, honestly, I have kind of forgotten most of this book, so I do apologize for that, and I don't want to try and pretend that I know what is going on here, so I'll tell you a little bit about what I remember. It follows kind of a private investigator who wants to travel back to where he grew up in Shanghai and find out what happened in the disappearance of his parents when he was growing up. But when he gets there, he discovers things are very different as to when he was growing up, and his memories are playing tricks on him. If you haven't noticed, memory is clearly an important theme to Ishiguro, which he explores in most of his books, and this is another one of them. And this book focuses on kind of confusion of identity because this guy now lives in the UK. That's another theme that Ishiguro likes to explore a lot. And cross-culturalism, as well as kind of parental loss and, as I said, memory. Now, would this be a good place to start? Again, as I said, I can't remember perfectly, so sorry about that, but maybe that is giving you a sign that it isn't a good place to start, because I think that the other ones were much more impactful, so the ones that I've recommended to you is obviously where I would recommend you to start. And finally, I must mention Nocturnes, 5 Stories of Music and Nightfall. Ishiguro loves music. It is very evident in most of his books. Music has appearances in almost all of his books, and like a certain level of importance given to it in the books. You can tell it's a big passion of his. So this collection is 5 stories in which music is part of the story. It's the main part of the story. And that's about all I can really say. Because they're short stories, it's very difficult to go into what they are about, but all of them here have this kind of typical Ishiguro style, that bubbling underneath of something weird going on. But honestly, I feel like it's harder to explore that in the short form, and it comes out much better in his longer form, where we can get this gradual revealing of what's going on. So it's for that reason, I wouldn't necessarily say you just should start there, although it does give you a good example of his style of writing. But I think this one is more for completionists like me. So yeah, that is all of his books that I have talked about now. So finally, I'm going to finish off by giving you my ranking of his books. I guess this could change, but at the moment this feels pretty solid. Maybe it would change upon rereading some of the books. I could see that happening. So I guess now I'm going to give you a top 9 of Ishiguro's works. So number 9, if you watched my recent wrap-up where I read this book, The Unconsoled comes in last. This is one of my least favourite books I've ever read, which is funny considering that he is one of my favourite authors, but I didn't enjoy this book at all. It felt completely directionless, extremely irritating, very difficult to read, with no emotional payoff, and I still cannot work out the point of this book. So yeah, I didn't like it at all. So number 8, I'm just going to say When We Were Orphans, and this is mainly just because it has fallen out of my brain. So I can't really say that I love it or like it or dislike it or anything, but because it's left no impression on me, it is coming in second to last place. So number 7, we will go with Nocturnes. I'm not the biggest fan of short stories. There are some that have really impacted me, but I would say maybe 80 to 90% of them haven't impacted me, and that was the case with all 5 of these. Again, that they've kind of mostly fallen out of my brain. Yeah, just didn't really leave a big impression, but Ishiguro's great writing was still there, so it was still worth reading them. And I wouldn't say they were bad, they're just not gonna ever be high up in my opinion. So we come to number 6, which is The Buried Giant for me. This was an odd one. I wish I'd knew more about it going into it. You know, sometimes I like to know nothing, but I kind of wish I knew more about this book because I didn't really know what was going on again, and it felt, again, kind of directionless. I think this is a book that would really benefit from a reread, and I think if I reread it, there's a lot that I would appreciate about it. It wasn't bad by any means, but compared to other books that I've read by him, it just didn't have the same emotional effect. Still, a decent read. I read it in my book club, and it was fun to talk about it. Most people didn't like it, but yeah, again, I think this is one of these stories that really benefits from 2 reads, so I might have to do that someday soon. Number 5, top 5, we are coming into the books that I love. All of these books from now on, I have absolutely loved. So it was kind of difficult to place them, and all of these are great. So number 5 for me is An Artist of the Floating World. Beautiful kind of exploration of, yeah, just changing attitudes, and like I said, that kind of contextual language. It maybe didn't really hit me really emotionally, but I just really loved the style of writing in here and the depictions of Japan, and it just felt real and personal. So I really enjoyed that book. Number 4 is going to be Clara and the Sun. Again, a really emotional ending for this one. I very much enjoyed this. I liked him going kind of slightly more sci-fi than he has before. I love me some AI, and it was just like taking a big sci-fi concept and putting it into the personal, which he is so good at. So I really enjoyed Clara and the Sun. Number 3, this is where it started getting really difficult. So number 3 for me is going to be The Remains of the Day. That's one I have physically. So this was a weird read, because at the start you've got like 30 to 40 pages of this guy describing butlering, and I was like, what the hell am I reading? Why am I reading about how to be a good butler? This is really boring and odd. But as the story progresses, it just becomes so personal and so intimate. And by the end, I was shedding a tear, because it is just so emotional. And you just really feel this guy's plight. And it just makes you question your own life as well. So really, really wonderfully done. A great book. Number 2, the one I read last. And the first book he wrote, A Pale View of Hills. Man, the end of this book is really what tipped the scale. Like, I was enjoying the book a lot, but there's just one thing that he does, and it happens in a really short amount of time. And it is just one of the most powerful things I've read. It's just absolutely genius. And again, it just makes you think back to the whole book, and it just made me want to pick it up straight away and start trying to pick up on stuff that you'd clearly been putting in there, but you don't realize until you get to this end point. And it's just really emotional, very sad, and just absolutely genius. What a wonderful way to start your career as a writer. Excellent book. So that leaves us with number 1, Never Let Me Go. I just really love the concept. I really love how it slowly comes out. I really love this setting. I love like the kind of difficult relationship of the friendships. And again, it just has a really emotional impact towards the end of the book. I just think this is a genius book. Very subtle, and it's just, in my opinion, it is it is top tier Kazuo Ishiguro and top tier kind of subtle sci-fi. So Never Let Me Go is my favorite Ishiguro book. So that is it for today's video. If you've made it this far, I thank you so much. That's it for Kazuo Ishiguro. I've got nothing else to read by him. It's kind of a bittersweet moment. I'm really happy that I've read everything by him, but also kind of sad that there's nothing else to read. Thankfully, most of his books really do lend to rereading, so that will definitely be happening at some point in my future, probably many times in my future. And I just really hope he releases one more at some point, maybe 2 more, whatever, you know. I just really hope he keeps going, but if not, he has clearly left a brilliant legacy, and I really implore you to pick up some of these books if you haven't. If you have, let me know what you've read, what you've loved, what you've not loved. I'd really like to have a conversation with you in the comments, but that is it for now. If you liked the video, please press like. If you're new here, please think about subscribing and joining my journey. But that is it. So I will see you in another video soon. Goodbye.